So thank you for that kind introduction. And again, hello, everybody. I'm going to share my disclosures because I will be sharing research that I have participated in and others have participated in. So whenever we give a presentation, we like to say who sponsored that various research. And you can see a lot of it has been sponsored by the pharmaceutical companies that make a lot of the medication or device treatments, as well as the National Headache Foundation, the US Food and Drug Administration. So those are my disclosures. So what I'd like to do today is share with you some of the research that we've conducted on living with migraine. And then as I talk about these different areas of impact, if you feel so inclined, please tell me in the chat, yes, I've experienced that, or I've experienced something similar, or I've experienced something different, or I don't experience that, because I'd really love to hear your feedback as we go. And that way, if you have questions for me, I'd like to really tailor the information I'm sharing to you. So I have several hats, and I'm really lucky that I get to work as a psychologist, working with people with migraine and other chronic painful diseases one-on-one. And one-on-one, of course, in the privacy of the office and the sanctity of that psychologist-patient relationship we talk about a lot of painful experiences, a lot of impacts that migraine has on all sorts of aspects of people's lives. And then what amazes me is as I go throughout my research with my colleagues, much of my research with Dr. Richard Lipton and other colleagues, where we survey tens of thousands of people living with migraine, I'm always amazed how everything complements each other. The individual story that I hear in detail in my clinic office is said 60,000 times in, for example, the Overcome study or the AMPP study, the CaMEO study. And so both of these views have really helped inform my experience and understanding of what it's like to live with migraine, as well as I do have migraine myself, but mine is not very frequent, knock on wood. So I have the experience, but not to the extent probably many people listening do have. So just as a quick reminder, what is migraine? Migraine is a chronic disease, so we like to use the singular term migraine. You live with migraine, with these episodic attacks, certainly, as you know. Attacks can have several phases. There is a pre-headache phase. Sometimes you'll hear the word premonitory or prodromal phase, which can have all sorts of symptoms, including things like having certain cravings, like yawning a lot, like fatigue or feeling depressed, or feeling euphoric, nausea, or neck pain. Any of those can come before the headache phase. Some people will experience an aura. It will happen sometimes with some attacks, maybe not all, or maybe all for you. And that aura is anywhere from 5 to 60 minutes before the headache pain starts generally, and can have all sorts of unusual and often very concerning symptoms if you don't know what it is. It often affects visual, but can actually affect any of your senses, including auditory, including taste, gustatory, and may, or even kind of feeling that half of your body feels pins and needles, or is paralyzed, or is having a hard time moving, may include difficulty forming words or speaking. So the aura is generally the 5 to 60 minutes before the headache. If it does happen, it does resolve. And then the headache phase happens, which is that moderate to severe head pain. It may be a pounding, maybe one side, or it may be both. It may start up the back with neck pain. It can last anywhere from 4 to 72 hours if untreated. And hopefully, if you have an effective treatment, it goes faster. But even after the pain is gone, many people will talk about feeling washed out, fatigued, exhausted, still having cognitive impairment for another 24 to 48 hours after. People use the word brain fog, migraine hangover, and that's what scientifically we call the post-stromal period. But then interestingly, even between attacks, we call this the interictal phase. This comes from epilepsy work, where the the seizures called the ictus, and then time between seizures called interictal. So we borrowed that terminology. So the migraine attack is called the ictus, and then between attacks is interictal. And for some people, they may not always quite return to what baseline might have felt like. They may have mild headache that stays. They may have allodynia that stays. And allodynia is the symptom of something that's normally not painful, hurting. That's when your hair hurts, your ponytail hurts, wearing a hat hurts. For a man, shaving hurts, putting your head on a pillow, taking a, shaving your face. It's when skin or hair has pain that's not usually painful. And for some people, they may always be a little bit allodynic. Also, other sensitivities, like that sensitivity to light. You may be someone who needs hats and sunglasses, and maybe you have therapeutic glasses that you wear a lot of time because maybe you're always a bit hypersensitive to light, sounds, certain smells. You probably know what your smells are, and there are certain smells that are especially difficult for people, and they almost feel like they can be triggering of attacks or at least discomfort. So that's kind of the whole enchilada of the migraine cycle. And certainly when we think about this attack experience that is really a multiple day experience, how can this not impact your life? How can you be expected to live your life with these random, painful, disabling attacks that often come without much warning or without much rhyme or reason? Or even if they do come with rhyme or reason, say they're always related to your menstrual cycle, they still disrupt your life. So the World Health Organization agrees. In their most recent survey of diseases, migraine, in fact, was rated the second most disabling disease on the planet and the first most disabling for people aged 15 to 49. So kind of teen years to midlife. And the way that they rate that is by the number of people with the disease, and more than 1 billion people with a B on the planet live with migraine. And then the amount of lost time at work, school, family, social, leisure time. That's how they create this years lived with disability. That's how they do this metric. So in fact, the World Health Organization does know, in fact, that migraine can be quite disabling. This is something that 20, 30 years ago, no one thought of. And really, my colleague, Richard Lipton, and his colleague, Dr. Buzz Stewart, had to really start doing these large scale studies to show the impact on people's lives, to show payers, to show employers, to show governments who funded research, and to show also people living with their migraine and their families. This is quite impactful. And, migraine is kind of a thief of everything, big or small, frequent or infrequent, menial or important. It might be hard with migraine to get your children off to school, but it also affects big things. It affects people's weddings and their vacations they planned for. It affects decisions like going to like a certain educational program, going to college or graduate school, or traveling, moving, accepting promotions at work. The decision whether to have children or not are all affected by living with migraine. So let's talk about some of the research that we found with how migraine impacts people. Now, you probably know, if you live with migraine, or if you are a loved one of someone with migraine, that migraine is kind of like throwing a little stone in a pond. It has these ripples. It does not just affect the individual, especially when the individual is really being impaired with an attack. It's quite hard for that individual to function, and it's going to affect partners and children or seniors, other people you have to care for, including pets. Deirdre, we've been talking about Roxy there, your lovely Labrador, who may make a cameo appearance at any moment, right? I'm hoping she's going to appear. And in our recent FDA-sponsored study called the MICOAS, where we conducted qualitative interviews, and we just presented this week, the American Headache Society, in fact, many people mentioned the impact of migraine attacks on caring for their pets. You may be somewhere that you live in a place that you need to take your dog for a walk so that he or she can relieve him or herself, get exercise. Migraine has so many far-reaching impacts, and the more that we listen to people, the more we learn. People also mention things like driving. and how that could be dangerous. And when you're not able to drive, how limiting that is. People talked about the cognitive effects of migraine. That can be very difficult to focus, to focus on reading, focus on work tasks, to feel clear-headed, or even just to make the most simple decisions. And one woman said, I tell my husband, don't even ask me what I want for lunch. I don't know. Just bring me something. I don't know. So migraine has really far-reaching effects. So beyond the person living with migraine, it affects their communities, their families, teams, workplaces, schools, society. So migraine is quite impactful. Now, these are some real quotes from social media, where I asked on Facebook in the American Migraine Foundation community, much like Migraine Association of Ireland, how does migraine affect your life? And Teresa said, missing time with my kids is the hardest part for me. They don't understand. The guilt eats you alive. And Kristen said, I feel like I let everyone down at work, home, friends, anywhere they need a commitment. My coworkers resent me. Susan said, migraine is the biggest reason that led to my divorce. And in fact, in our CaMEO study, that was reported in a fair number of people, a statistically significant number of people. And I'll share more information about that. Betsy said, planning anything is hard because you never know if you'll be able to go. People stop inviting you. They say, oh, we didn't think you could make it anyway. I've lost most of my friends. So if you feel so inclined and want to write anything in the chat about how migraine has affected your life or is affecting your life, please feel free to go ahead and do that. Now, if you are a little more, would like to stay a little more private, also, as I ask questions throughout, just think in your head, take a moment to really think about it, and feel free to just kind of engage with yourself thinking about the answers to the questions. But I'm just wondering if these quotes resonate with anyone listening, if any of these pieces kind of are things you've experienced or sound like you. And again, those were kind of the one-on-one quotes. And then when we go to our studies, we start to see in the thousands, the tens of thousands. Our Overcome study has 60,000 people living with migraine. We start to see these numbers and responses in big, big ways. So again, as I said, there's actually 1 billion people with migraine right now around the world, and migraine is the second most disabling disease. So it is very common that it affects all this impact in life. And if you feel so inclined, let's first talk about relationships, family life. If you want to put anything in the chat about how migraines affected your relationships, your family life, your responsibilities as a parent, a partner, someone caring for a senior, or a medically, someone who has medical needs, someone caring for your pet, as we talked about from our recent MyCOAS project. So this is our CaMEO study. Where here we asked people either with chronic migraine or, well, we asked everybody, and we divided them into chronic migraine or episodic migraine. Chronic migraine means that they met criteria for migraine and had 15 or more days with headache on average for the past 3 months. Episodic would have been 14 or fewer. And people said you could see rates of about 40% of people with chronic migraine and about 15% of people with episodic migraine saying headaches have been a problem in my previous romantic relationships. We can see that almost 80% of those with chronic migraine say, if I didn't have headaches, I'd be a better spouse or partner. And we have about 45% of those episodic migraines saying that. We have about 65% of people saying, if I didn't have headaches, I'd be a better parent. And then, as I mentioned, we have about 10% of people with chronic migraine saying, I chose not to have children, delayed having children, had fewer children because of headaches, because of my migraine. We also had about 50% of people with chronic migraine saying, I would get along better with my children if I did not have headaches. So, and so Lisa said, my migraine is triggered by menstrual cycle. I'm 50 and I've been having migraine since 42. It affects my life with child as I'm a single mom, and it's debilitating for days on end. And absolutely, thank you for sharing that, Lisa. It's really hard to think as a single mom how to even care for your child with going through a migraine attack. And we know that moms are superheroes, and you probably do a really good job of trying to care for your child and caring for yourself and getting through it at the same time. And Donna said, you are very dependent on your partner for everything. So debilitating. Throughout stressful periods in my life, I'd have migraine every day for 2 months. So Donna, thank you for sharing. It does, migraine and any other chronic disease can really start to change the balance in a relationship and can be quite difficult with partners, in that if one person kind of always has more needs or is feeling that they are more of a care receiver and the partner is a caregiver, that can really change the balance and kind of throw off more of an equal sharing partnered relationship. And that can create some difficult dynamics for both people. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, Donna. It's a really important thing to keep in mind. As I mentioned, we have found now in multiple studies that people do make decisions about whether to have children or not, or they have major worries about parenting, their ability to be a good parent because of migraine. So I showed you data from the CaMEO study, which is a US study, the Eurolight study, which is 11 different European countries, and the ARMR study, which is a US registry. All had respondents saying the same thing. In the ARMR study, with 20% of women said they avoided pregnancy because of their migraine. They either had fewer children, they were more likely to have chronic migraine or more frequent migraine to make that decision. And their beliefs were, they were worried that migraine might get worse during their pregnancy. They were worried about the thought of needing to go off treatment during pregnancy or pre-pregnancy, trying to conceive, or post-pregnancy breastfeeding. If you have medication treatments or other treatments that are working, it's really distressing to think about having to stop those for a long period of time for trying to conceive and being pregnant. They were worried that their migraine medications might negatively affect their child's development. They were worried that migraine would make pregnancy difficult, worried that migraine would cause the baby to have abnormalities at birth. And I have to say that one is, there are no scientific data for that. So please don't worry about that. Nonetheless, it's important to collect the data and see what people are thinking and worrying about, because that also helps us know what type of education we want to all share. And in the Eurolight study, we had about 17% of people talking about difficulties in love life due to migraine. Again, people talking about having fewer or no children because of migraine, and almost 1% talking about marital separation or divorce due to migraine. So it's kind of around the world that people are having these same really big impacts, just reminding us that migraine is a significant burden for many, many people. Oops. So in the CaMEO study, we asked, if you did not have migraine, how would life be different? And we asked about several different ways. And we had about 20,000 people. And in those with chronic migraine, you can see the gray on the bottom, 61% said romantic relationships would be better, be it marriage or partner or dating. 56% said getting along with children would be better, and 53% said that the quality of their children's life would be better. So now let's think about career or an education. Not surprisingly, of course, migraine can have a significant impact on academics, on school, as well as career in so many different ways. And in these data from the CaMEO study, again, we can see on the left, with the dark blue being people with chronic migraine, the light blue being people with episodic migraine, that about 15% of those with chronic migraine said they cannot work at all due to migraine. About 23% said they had to reduce numbers of hours worked. We can see about 15% say they feel they're a burden to their coworkers, like maybe they don't do enough, they don't contribute enough, or they let their coworkers down. We see also people talking about that they earn less, or they didn't get a raise, they didn't get a good review, they didn't get a promotion, or they have a lower salary that they attribute in part or fully to living with migraine, or that they're unable to get education or training that they want because of migraine. So migraine can really affect concerns about finances, as well as the personal experience of doing work that you want to do and being proud of that work and feeling like you're able to be fully present when you want to and really do the quality of work that you want to. So about altogether, 2/3 of people felt that migraine had a negative impact on their career. And I don't want this presentation to be all negative. So after we get through the data, I want us to talk about strategies. But I want to mention right now that, of course, there are accommodations that are legally required in various countries, including the US, and I'm sure including Ireland. And Deirdre, you can tell us. Yes, good. To make the workplace accessible so that all people can work. So there may be accommodations that you may be able to get, which might help with work. And the same goes with school. So when it comes to school, there are a lot of accommodations that can help someone with migraine be successful, be it more time for tests, be it the ability to make up a quiz or an exam or a project or a homework project should he or she have to miss it due to an attack or be having a hard period leading up to that time. Sometimes you can get extra tutoring. Sometimes you can be allowed to have class notes via audio. It really varies by institution, but across the board, especially higher education institutions, will already have many things in place that they've thought out. And often you'll have to find the right office or officer or person who would handle the kind of accessibility issues. But so often there are ways to get support that can help you still succeed and not have to feel like you need to leave school or uni or leave or drop back in your workplace. So think about that if you haven't already. Those are your rights and they're there for you. If for some reason you reach out to someone and don't get support, you can always go back to your doctor if you're seeing a doctor for migraine and get a medical letter. And that often goes a very long way, saying that you need certain accommodations. But accommodations are often there. And I think Migraine Association of Ireland can probably help with some ideas and resources for that. So again, we asked people in CaMEO, would life be better in your financial career success without migraine? And again, we had like about 50% of people saying yes, finances would be better and career success and coworker relationships. So actually, thank you. We have a comment here. Under employment law in Ireland, migraine is a disability. Therefore, every employer should not discriminate against you. Any worries, contact WRC. So excellent. Thank you. Good. Now, of course, even if we know that, we probably take it on ourselves. And there can be a great deal of stigma associated with living with migraine. Stigma can be a couple kinds of stigma. One type of stigma is internal stigma. It's how do you feel about yourself? Do you yourself feel guilty, embarrassed, feel that you're letting other people down? That's internal stigma. There's also an external stigma, how others view people with a particular disease or condition. And migraine is highly stigmatized. In fact, unfortunately, it is not viewed well often by colleagues and coworkers, sometimes by healthcare professionals, sometimes by insurers and payers and governments who make grants for various types of health research, medical research. So we're working very hard both to uncover the various types of stigma that exist in migraine and also think about how to combat against this stigma. But many individuals will start taking it upon themselves, feel embarrassed, guilty, feel that they're letting their family down, they're letting their coworkers down, they're not achieving enough. And so I'm just wondering if this is a feeling that anyone listening has experienced, kind of, even though you may know this is a neurologic disease, it happens in the nervous system, various neurochemicals start an attack and bring it on, and you go through this very long, multi-phased experience. And yet, do you tend to kind of take it upon yourself as a personal failing? And I find that many, many people do. So in the Eurolight study of 11 countries in Europe, we found that about a third of both men and women said that friends and family do not understand. About 10% said employers and colleagues don't understand. oh, I'm sorry, about a third said they avoid telling others. So they kind of hide and just try and put on a good front, a brave front, and just kind of keep marching forward. And then about 10% said friends and family don't understand, and about 10% said employers and colleagues don't understand. Well, when I talk to people in individual therapy sessions, I would find these rates to be much, much higher, that people try to kind of hide and not burden others with migraine, that they don't want to be a burden on others. They don't want to cause their coworkers to have to do more or to pick up slack for them. They don't want to let their family down in home responsibilities or ruin the vacation or ruin the party. This is something that I hear quite often. So someone wrote, same as above, so debilitating and stigma, trying to hide it. And someone wrote, kind of looking about the accommodations, comfort, reasonable accommodation act is good primarily in education. However, migraine is not under the LTI scheme, long-term illness, so it has its limitations in the workplace. So interesting. So I'm learning some really important information today. In the US, we have also multiple levels of problems about migraine being recognized as a disability by our Social Security and Disability National US Registry, although usually in individual workplaces, there may be more accommodations, and in individual schools, there may be more accommodations. When we asked in the CaMEO, actually this is from My Migraine Voice, a 2018 study of European, Canadian, and US individuals who had taken 2 or more preventive medications and been failed by them. So the preventive medications did not work well enough for them or were not tolerable. And they also had 4 or more migraine days per month. We see that about 48% said they feel misunderstood by people. We see depression reported by about 41%. We see 39% saying, I hate my life. Another 39 saying, I feel helpless or feel out of control of my life. That's about 12,000 people with migraine from around the world. And these are comments that, again, I hear one-on-one talking to people, be it in my office, be it through advocacy. And then again, we hear in the thousands, the tens of thousands, people echoing the same experience. So I want to move a little bit into living with migraine and living well with migraine, thriving despite migraine. First off, let's acknowledge that you have a right to any and all of these feelings. And there's probably many more feelings that I didn't even add on this slide. And if you want to write down more feelings that you have in the chat, please go ahead. Or if you want to think about them yourself, or if you're just keeping your own piece of paper at home, what else are you feeling? These are natural responses to living with a chronic, painful, unpredictable, debilitating condition, disease that makes life harder. In fact, I'd be surprised for people living with migraine to not have at least some of these feelings. This is not an easy road. And so it is normal to feel all of these things. And it's very common to have depression and or anxiety when living with migraine. They are, in fact, comorbid. And comorbid means that 2 diseases occur at a greater rate than chance. And they are comorbid with migraine for a couple reasons. One is that some of the same neurotransmitters actually are involved in depression and migraine and anxiety and migraine. For example, serotonin is one of the neurotransmitters that's involved in both. In worse news, as migraine gets more frequent and more severe, rates of depression and anxiety just go right up hand in hand. They just move right up together in lockstep. In better news, when a treatment is effective, be it medication, neurostimulation, biofeedback, or CBT, or healthy lifestyle habits, doesn't matter what the treatment, any treatment that starts to lower the number of monthly migraine days does go with lowering depression and anxiety. So that's been really nice that we see that consistency. And that's always encouraging that as things improve with migraine, that also those experiences improve and those feelings improve. But it is normal to have all of these feelings and beyond. And Donna wrote also a sense of dread when an attack is coming on. And so, Donna, we've studied that extensively because so many of our research respondents would talk about that feeling, so much that we made a questionnaire about it called the Migraine Interictal Burden Scale. And we study how does the anxiety, worry, and stress about migraine and impending attacks affect you even between attacks and before attacks? And that is incredibly common for people to experience worry and fear about when the next attack will come, what kind of impact it will have, how bad it will be, how long it will last, and what kind of effects it will have on their life. And in fact, interictal burden, that worry before attack, the worry between attacks, has been shown to be incredibly highly associated with stigma. So the more people are feeling kind of ashamed, guilty, personally embarrassed and responsible due to migraine, the greater dread they also do have about when the next attacks are coming. It's also very associated with how optimized or non-optimized someone's treatment is. So people who have treatments they feel that they can count on, they believe and feel more confident in, have less of that dread. Rightfully, that makes a lot of sense because they're having fewer attacks. Their attacks may be shorter. They might not be as intense. They might resolve more quickly when you have good treatment. So there's very real experience that we've done a lot of research with to try to figure out what it comes from and how to treat it. I think one thing that a lot of us like to think about is kind of what have we missed or lost due to migraine? And it's fair. It's a very normal kind of innate response to think about these things and to feel sadness about this, to feel worry about this. We wouldn't be human if we didn't. But also, I'm going to put on my psychologist hat and say, the more that we do focus on what we have missed, the more that the depression and anxiety kind of increases because our focus has that lens on it of the real sadness and the real grief about what we're missing. Now, I want to acknowledge that you have every right to grieve. That may sound like a strange word, but I actually choose that word intentionally. You may not be living the life that you planned, the life that you expected, the life that you wanted, the life that you deserve because of migraine. And there may be many things you've missed. There may be many things that you did not get to do or did not get to do in the way you wanted to, or feel limited by or impacted by. And it is very fair to experience that loss, that grief, and mourn it. And if you've had other losses in your life, other types of grief, you may have heard of the stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross developed. When we lose a loved one, for example, that there's often kind of denial, bargaining, anger. In the end, we kind of move to an acceptance. And the acceptance doesn't have to be, I'm okay with living like this. I'm okay with this frequency or this severity of attacks. It's more, okay, my nervous system responds like this. This is something I live with. That piece is the acceptance piece. But also, I want to hope that everyone feels empowered to advocate for themselves. There has literally never been a better time in the history of man and womankind to have migraine. We have never had so many effective and tolerable treatments, including medications, neurostimulation, behavioral like CBT, relaxation, biofeedback, and some of the important lifestyle modifications. We have never had this amount that we've had. Now, that being said, you may be someone who has tried all of the new treatments and maybe they still don't work for you. And there is a percentage of people for whom that is true. And to you, I want to say, we are not giving up on you. In fact, there are new targets being studied right now. The last target was the calcitonin gene-related peptide, CGRP, and Dr. Peter Goadsby first started looking at that with his colleagues 25 years ago, and it took 20 years to get to these monoclonal antibodies, small molecule GPANs, and they have helped a lot of people. And if you have not tried them and you're living with frequent migraine, it's worth trying. If you've tried them and they have not helped you enough, rest assured that entirely new molecular targets are being studied now, and different people's brains may respond yes to this one, no to that one. So there's still new treatments coming. Also, if you've tried them and they haven't worked for you, you may also want to think about adding on, for example, some of the lifestyle changes that matter. Getting good quality sleep really matters for your nervous system. Staying hydrated, eating healthy, low inflammation types of diets can really make a good difference. Exercising and practicing various relaxation techniques can really make a good difference. It calms the sympathetic nervous system, that nervous system that gets activated with migraine attacks. So while sometimes you may think, oh, I don't know if that's for me, it sounds a little silly, give it a try if you never have. The research show that the combination of medication plus the behavioral, like doing your relaxation practice, your mindfulness, or your exercise, actually is better than either one alone. And one place you can try it if you haven't tried it is on my website, dawnbuse.com. I have some breathing and relaxation exercises. Breathing in a paced breathing actually moderates the vagal nerve, which is the nerve that runs between the brain and the gut, and is quite involved in migraine pathophysiology. So while we may think, oh, that sounds a little not something I'm quite interested in, it doesn't sound like hard science. Actually, the science of that goes back thousands and thousands of years, actually. So start thinking of combining different things as well. So let's think about staying empowered. I know I started this presentation with really talking about how hard life with migraine is, and I do acknowledge that. That has been my life's work to study. But it is the right time to advocate for yourself. And it might be starting with talking to a doctor or healthcare professional if you haven't, or if you already have, it might be time to up the ante and get better treatments for yourself. And as I talked about, there are combinations that can work really well. The lifestyle pieces I just mentioned, the sleep, the healthy diet, the exercise, the stress management, the behavioral, which can be cognitive behavioral therapy, relaxation therapy, biofeedback. And in fact, if you look on my website, you'll see that as well as the relaxation exercises, also I have a biofeedback app that I've developed with colleagues that's available for free right from the smartphone. Well, it's actually iPhone for now, while we're developing it, that you can actually try biofeedback just from the camera on your phone. You never know, give it a try. Maybe it'll work for you. Pharmacologic, we have more treatment options than ever before. Many people get effective treatment from the traditional medications. And then many people are finding if those traditional medications didn't work for them, that the new medications can be helpful. Neuromodulation, which is an external stimulation of the nerves, maybe to the forehead, maybe to the vagal nerve, to the neck. There's some that kind of go in the front and the back. So getting the occipital nerves as well as the trigeminal nerves. Something to think about, maybe talk to your doctor about. And complementary and integrative medicines. So either you might want to have a first conversation with a healthcare professional, or to kind of improve on what you've got. It might be time to step it up a little bit. As I mentioned, depression, anxiety are common with migraine. And in fact, either one can come first. Migraine can come first, or depression, anxiety can come first. And there are other mental health diseases as well, such as PTSD, bipolar disorder, suicidal ideation, and non-suicidal self-injury or self-harm, such as cutting or other types of self-harm, are all also common for people with migraine. Panic attacks, also people who have had adverse childhood experiences, been abused or traumatized as children or adults. So it's not that either one necessarily causes the other, it's that the biology of the nervous system, they kind of hang together. as a cluster or a constellation that all kind of goes together. They work on with some of the same neurotransmitters. And we find that when you treat any of these diseases, be it migraine first or depression first or anxiety first, the rest get a little better as well. So they all are kind of together. So if you feel that migraine, or if you feel that depression, anxiety, panic attacks, or feeling suicidal or helpless, hopeless is an issue for you, think about finding a mental health professional, which could be psychologist, psychiatrist, a counselor, or you can always talk to your primary care professional. Or you may want to get sources of support from other places in your life, or also so maybe you talk to a mental health professional, and maybe there is a religious or spiritual leader who's important in your life. Think about your advocacy and support groups. Certainly Migraine Association of Ireland is here for you. And your social support network. Think about the people who support you, the people who are more accepting, more flexible, the people who bring you joy, happiness, calm. Think about who that group is for you. It may not always be the people we're related to. It may not always be the people we're working with. You may have to find that group who truly supports you. And sometimes it is an online support group of people living with migraine because they truly understand. Sometimes the way to achieve happiness also is not only improving our situation, but changing our expectations a little bit. And I think this is for us as well as the people around us. So you've probably already done this. I'm guessing your family, friends, coworkers, you've already explained, I may need this. I may have to miss this from time to time. I may have to come late or leave early or go in a dark, quiet room. But the more you can set those expectations for others in advance, you can actually take a little bit of the guilt and worry off of yourself, a little bit lessening of the dread of those next attacks, and also let others kind of participate, because people who care about you, they want to help, and they don't know what to do. And so giving them the expectations of how you'd like them to help, or what you need them to do, or what things might look like, can be really helpful and avoid a lot of the feelings of guilt and worry and dread that come naturally. And so I'm guessing if you live with migraine, you probably already are good at making plans and backup plans and other backup plans. And if this is something you do and want to put it in the chat, please put some examples. If you are someone with a pet and you have a bad migraine day and you need to walk your dog, maybe you have a partner or a roommate, or you have to hire someone to come in and walk your dog. As a parent, you may have to think about, what's my plan B? If I can't drive my child to school, who can do it? Are there parent friends? Are there other people? Can you hire a college student to be helpful? What is your plan B? And really, one gift that you can give other people in your life is letting them help you. So often people who care about us want to help. And I find that people with migraine are very strong and really try to soldier on their own. But by letting people help, not only does it help you a little bit, but it gives them a way that they can feel that they're being useful. And that actually makes everyone feel good. Also, the idea of thinking about, how have you become stronger because of this ordeal that you've been through, this weight that you have to bear? And we asked this in, let's see, where did that data point go? Okay, sorry. Can't find that data point, but we did ask this in the My Migraine Voice study, and people talked about becoming more flexible, becoming more confident in themselves, realizing that they can manage through stressors and hard times, and feeling proud of themselves. And those are all good things. In addition, your coworkers, your children, your families, your partners all realize how strong you are, and you set an example for others about being resilient. One thing that can happen for anyone living with any chronic illness or disability is that you start to get that as your primary identity. And that actually takes away from other aspects of your life. And life can get kind of smaller and smaller. It can shrink in on itself, where all of a sudden it feels like you are just a person with migraine. And one thing that's really good for your spirits, your mood, your self-identity is to remember all of those facets of who you are. You know, you're a diamond who sparkles with so many different facets, and really remember and reach back out to those other parts of yourself so that you remember you are more than a person with migraine. That's really important for keeping your kind of sense of identity and for combating the depression and anxiety and the kind of shrinking of identity and roles that can happen when you're living with a disease that can really start to feel isolating. I'm just going to look at the comments. Feel free to add into chat any thoughts you have as I'm talking here, anything that's resonating with you, anything that makes sense, anything that doesn't make sense. And we're going to have a few moments. I'm almost at the end of the presentation. So we're going to have a few minutes to ask questions that I would love to answer any questions or just have conversation if you want to share examples. As I talked about in the grief process, there's some acceptance that is required for living well with migraine or any chronic illness, despite the best medications and doing everything to the best of your ability, planning things and trying to get good sleep and trying to get exercise and trying to eat healthy, you will likely still have some migraine attacks. It's a very small percentage of people who go from active migraine to no attacks. And there's some acceptance from that. And I love this quote by Jon Kabat-Zinn, a wonderful meditation teacher and psychologist, who says, we can't stop the waves from coming, but we can learn how to surf. So it's really the idea that life, be it migraine or any other condition, keeps throwing things at us. And that it's not how many times we get knocked down, it's how many times we get back up. And we always get back up one more time than we get knocked down. So cultivating that resilience. But part of the stigma that I see for people living with migraine is that they're quite hard on themselves, much harder on themselves than I think they would be to a friend or family member or colleague living with a disease or going through a tough time. So please be gentle with yourself. Understand that your nervous system may be more sensitive and more responsive to internal and external cues than others, and react with this thunderstorm of symptoms in this constellation that is the migraine attack. And it's just biology. This is not a personal failing of yours. And you are very brave to continue to cope with it. So sometimes we have to be a little easier on ourselves. And here are those data I mentioned about, what strengths did you realize about yourself from living with migraine? And we saw that 40% of people said, I learned to cope better, 11% made me stronger. And as I mentioned, there were several other things that people realized about themselves that they could live with and cope with and advocate through this difficult disease. So the last recommendation I want to make for living well with migraine and thriving is keep sight of your goals and expect better. This is a good time in the history of migraine to receive care and to expect better outcomes. And what I mean by keep sight of your goals is remember the things in life that you care about, that make you happy, that bring you joy, that bring you pride, that you want to do, that are meaningful for you. They may be work, they may be family, they may be a philanthropy or a volunteer project. They may be self-betterment, they may be enjoyment experiences. Whatever it is, remind yourself of that goal and put that goal out there. Put on a Post-it on your bathroom mirror and look at it every morning. Remind yourself what you're working for, what you're working towards. And that will help you continue to advocate for yourself to get the best care you can and the best outcomes that you can. So I started the presentation talking about how challenging life with migraine is, and that we see that coming from data point from hundreds of thousands of people. And so it's a fact. We all know that migraine is disabling and burdensome, but I didn't want to leave it with that negativity. So I brought some ideas from what I would say if we were one-on-one in my office. And as a health psychologist, some of the things that I'd want to work through to help you live to the best to reduce your sense of stigma and guilt, to keep depression and anxiety lower, and keep you kind of advocating for better outcomes. And we have a little time, so I really want to answer any questions or just hear discussion or comments you'd like to share.